Revenge with Karen.
The laughter didn't sting at first. It landed like static, distant, unreal, echoing off the glass conference room walls, while the light overhead flickered just enough to make the whole place feel like a fever dream. Madison blinked once, twice, trying to process what she was holding. Her badge, deactivated, and a note scribbled in Sharpie on company stationery like it was some kind of edgy startup joke. This isn't personal. Just progress. Someone, maybe Greg from product, maybe that intern with the vape pen, let out a cough-snort hybrid that tipped the rest of the room into giggles. Not full-throated laughs, no, this was worse. It was choking on schadenfreude laughter. The kind people let out when they're grateful it's not them up there. Madison turned her head slowly toward the podium, where the head of people was already pivoting to some syrupy speech about growth through change. The same guy who used to pass her in the kitchen and call her Maureen without blinking. 8 years. 8 years of quietly shoveling corporate sludge with a plastic spoon, while everyone else got gold-plated snow shovels and shout-outs in town halls. She'd led the last 3 internal audits that stopped the company from getting slapped by the FTC. He'd fixed the HRIS database personally after someone's nephew tried to merge the gender and favorite fruit fields during a diversity initiative. And now this. She didn't cry, not even close. Madison was the kind of woman who read terms and conditions for fun and corrected typos in other people's Slack bios. But the silence as she walked out, that stuck. The kind where no one wants to meet your eye, not even the receptionist you once helped smuggle a service dog past facilities. By the way, if you're still listening and this already feels like something you'd binge during your lunch break while pretending to look at an Excel sheet, do us a solid. Hit that little subscribe button, like the video. It's free. It helps more than you think, and honestly, it keeps our petty revenge department in caffeine and spite. Now back to the mess. She reached the stairwell before she even opened the envelope fully. The moment the plastic card slid out, gray, blank, lifeless, she already knew what it meant. Badge deactivated, access revoked. And the kicker, the note had a coffee ring stain on it. It hadn't even earned fresh paper. At the bottom of the stairs, Madison stepped out into the sunlight, blinking hard. The world was still turning. Her phone vibrated, LinkedIn push notification. Celebrate 8 years at Environ Tech with Madison. She let out a short bark of a laugh that made a passing jogger flinch. They really thought they'd buried her, like they hadn't just pissed off the one person in the company who actually knew where the bodies were buried. You see, Madison wasn't flashy. She didn't network. She didn't pose next to whiteboards or clap in meetings like her palms were currency. What she did was remember. Everything. Every waiver, every ignored compliance flag, every late-night approval that shouldn't have been greenlit, and most importantly, every clause. They thought her silence meant weakness, but what it actually meant was she was waiting. She went home that day and didn't scream, didn't rant. She poured herself a Diet Coke with a shot of bourbon, opened her laptop, and clicked on a folder tucked 3 layers deep in her personal Google Drive. The name, break glass if screwed. The contents, eats, memos, private audit logs, CEO signed overrides, SEC correspondence, and 1 contract copy initialed, watermarked, and quietly bulletproof. See, Madison's title was always Senior Risk Analyst, but her real role, buried halfway through her contract, signed 5 years ago during a leadership transition, Designated Compliance Authority, DCA, reporting directly to CEO oversight, and her termination, unauthorized, which meant if anyone had bothered to read the fine print, they hadn't just fired a paper pusher. They'd nuked their own legal immunity. But no one knew that, not yet. The glow of her laptop was the only light in the apartment that night. Madison sat cross-legged on the floor, hair still up in the same bun she'd worn to the all-hands meeting, like her body hadn't quite caught up with the emotional whiplash. On her screen, a folder with a nondescript name, Budget Roll-Up Q3 archived. She clicked it. Inside were over 400 documents, every compliance memo she'd ever flagged, every audit summary, every legal risk assessment marked internal eyes only. Scans of physical sign-offs, emails forwarding warnings from federal regulators, spreadsheets color-coded with yellow for fixable and red for we'll set this company on fire. And 1 PDF near the top, labeled simply, Clause 9 DCA Oversight. Memory hit her like black coffee to the gut. 2 years ago, the CEO had called her into his office, not through his assistant, not with calendar flair, but with a plain text Slack message. Can you come by for a sec? Need something airtight. He was already pale then, jaw tight, that bone-deep exhaustion no PR filter could cover. He'd waved her in, shut the door, and slid a printed page across the table. "You're the only one who actually reads what they sign. I need this locked down before I take medical leave." At the time, she thought he just wanted to clean up legacy messes, smooth out liabilities, cover his exit. But now it felt like something else, like a last-minute fireproof safe in a burning house. He'd asked her to archive it all, not in the company drive, not in Box, not on the clunky internal servers where interns could rename files to final use this 3. DocX. No, he told her to keep it private, off-site, shared only with his personal recovery email. His exact words, "only open if I'm not around." But the bastard was around. Madison clicked open her inbox. At the top sat a fresh email from less than an hour ago. From Jonathan R. Keen, subject, "You were right. It's happening. Body, saw the stream. Still recovering but lucid. Reviewing your archive now. No action yet, let them sweat. Just confirming they violated the clause. Badly. More soon. No sign-off, no flare. Just cold confirmation." Madison leaned back and exhaled through her nose. This wasn't just corporate cruelty or another soul-sucking reshuffle. This was illegal. Clause 9. Subsection C. Line 4. Termination of the designated compliance authority, without direct CEO-signed authorization, immediately revokes indemnity privileges for executive-level decisions retroactive to date of action. Translation. Every executive action taken post-termination, approvals, payouts, sign-ons, restructures, was now legally exposed, and nobody knew. The board probably thought they'd done her a mercy, letting her go without a scene, offering her the dignity of silence, as if dropping her into corporate exile with a smile was some kind of favor. They didn't know they'd gutted their own parachute mid-flight. She kept scrolling through the folder. There it was, the draft response she'd written 6 months ago to a flagged vendor onboarding linked to overseas shell contracts. The CEO had written "good catch" in all caps and signed off with a thumbs-up emoji. She hadn't just been their cleanup crew, she'd been their liability firewall. And without her boom, it was surreal watching years of being invisible turn into leverage. These weren't just files, they were dominoes lined up, waiting, and tonight the first one had already fallen. She picked up her phone, no texts from anyone at the company, no apologies, not even a vague HR follow-up. They really thought it was over. Madison cracked her knuckles and started composing a new file. Termination trigger, internal timeline. Because tomorrow, when those meeting invites went out, she wasn't coming back as the woman they fired. She was coming back as the clause they never should have ignored. The ping hit like a rifle crack in the legal department's Slack channel. 2:17 a.m. Riya Patel, Associate General Counsel, linked at the encrypted message that landed in her inbox with a red exclamation mark. She was on call that week, had just dozed off in a half-made guest room with a sad cup of peppermint tea on the windowsill. The subject line read, Section 9 breach. Immediate review required. She sat up straight, clicked. The sender, Jonathan Keen, CEO, supposedly on medical leave with the CFO quietly managing in his absence. The message was short, precise, cold. Ordered clause Section 9, subsection C, line 4. The compliance authority role is subject solely to the discretion and oversight of the CEO. Any termination conducted without written CEO authorization renders all executive indemnity protections null and void, retroactively from the date of said action. This clause supersedes all board-level personnel motions involving compliance roles. Attached, Madison Clark's signed employment contract. The clause highlighted, CEO signature dated, notarized, and filed. Riya froze. Her stomach dropped. Then she read it again and again. It was real. They'd fired Madison, the DCA, without CEO approval. No vote, no clause check, no internal review, and now they just detonated their own indemnity shield. No wonder Keen was watching from the shadows. He hadn't gone dark. He'd gone strategic. Within seconds, her hands flew across the keyboard. She flagged the message, forwarded it to the GC, fired off a confirm receipt ping to finance, HR, and the temporary acting CEO. Then she picked up her phone and called Garrett Rowe, the chief legal officer. He answered with a groggy cough. This better be nuclear. She didn't breathe. They terminated Madison Clark. No CEO sign-off. Her role was locked under Section 9. Dead silence. Then just one word. Shit. 5 minutes later. entire legal leadership team was back online. They dug into the clause history, verified it against internal policy documents, confirmed the badge deactivation timestamp. The picture came into focus fast and ugly. Because here's what that one clause did. It froze all outgoing funds flagged under executive decisioning post-Madison's termination, which, coincidentally, included $1.2 million in board bonuses, 3 major vendor contracts, 2 international licensing renewals, and the entirety of a pending stock option release for the CFO's retirement plan. Worse, it also flagged the company's compliance profile with the SEC as in review, which meant they couldn't process their Q4 bonuses without triggering external disclosure. It was as if Madison had pulled a thread from the company's Gucci tie, and the whole damn suit unraveled in one night. Yet opened a live document titled Immediate Exposure Risk. The numbers were staggering. Garrett just muttered, "Jesus Christ, who approved her firing?" Silence. Nobody had. It was a back-channel whisper campaign. A slow, greasy slide into irrelevance fueled by a few insecure execs who didn't like being told no by a woman who actually knew what a clause meant. They'd laughed when she walked out, smirked when she didn't speak. What they didn't know was that she had never needed a mic drop. She'd already written the fine print, and they signed it. By 3:00 a.m., the full legal team had red eyes, shaking hands, and open tabs labeled things like reverse indemnity risk cases and CEO-exclusive compliance roles precedent. Someone in finance pinged, "Are we still running payroll for SVPs today?" Answer, "Pause. Immediately. Not process anything until compliance clarifies scope." And just like that, every golden parachute, every bonus, every backdated raise that was supposed to hit at midnight was frozen in amber. At 3:27 a.m., Garrett sat back, rubbing his temples. We're gonna need a war room. But across town, in a 2-bedroom apartment that still smelled like lemon floor cleaner and microwave mac and cheese, Madison was asleep. No plotting. No rage scrolling. Just quiet, because her work was already done. They'd handed her the bullet, and she'd simply loaded it into the contract. At 6:42 a.m., the office systems coughed to life. Phones lit up. Monitors woke from their corporate comas. And one by one, across corner offices with skyline views and glass walls polished to sterile perfection, calendars pinged with a subject line that hadn't been seen since the last major data breach. Urgent compliance, oversight, emergency, CEO directive mandatory. Immediate. No excuses. In the CFO's suite, a scalding coffee sloshed onto polished wood as he fumbled his phone. In HR, someone audibly whispered, "OF," which echoed off the soundproof walls like an omen. The acting CEO, Philip Brandt, man who once bragged that his most successful hire was his golf coach, stared at the screen and muttered, "Who the hell triggered this protocol?" And then came the second ping. From the CEO's personal assistant account. Addendum, seat 14 is assigned. Attendance mandatory. That seat hadn't been used in over 2 years. Not since the boardroom reshuffle when Jonathan Keene had carved out a single reserved chair for what he called the firewall. Everyone knew what that meant. Madison Clark. They'd laughed when she walked out. Thought she'd disappear into LinkedIn purgatory, join a think tank, or write a Medium post titled What I Learned from 8 Years in Compliance. Instead, she was walking through the back elevator corridor at 7:56 a.m. She'd parked underground. Her old badge didn't work because it had been replaced. Not reactivated, replaced. New color strip, slate black. The kind reserved for C-suite, security, and Clause 9, one roll above board-level veto, DCA. The guard at the private elevator didn't ask for ID. He just nodded. "Ma'am," she nodded back. No small talk, no expression. Just a black wool coat, tailored and clean, and a slim manila folder tucked under her arm like a scalpel she had no intention of using yet. Upstairs, the boardroom was already half full. The usual suspects. Brandt looking like someone had just punched him in the credit score. CFO Morton trying to preload excuses. Legal Chief Garrett with his laptop open and face pale like he'd seen the ghost of Q4 bonuses. And then, click. The door opened. Madison stepped in. The room went still, not silent still. Breath held, no chairs shifted. Nobody moved. It was like a predator had entered the room and they weren't sure what scent she hunted by. She walked directly to seat 14. It had been cleaned. Polished, chilled bottle of water placed beside it. She didn't sit yet. Just placed the manila folder on the table and calmly unbuttoned her coat, folding it across the back of the chair with surgical grace. No one said welcome back. No one dared say anything. Because in that moment, it hit them, truly hit them. This wasn't about office politics or bad optics. This wasn't a reputational bruise. They had broken a binding legal mechanism. The woman they tried to erase was now the only one with the power to fix it, or bury them with it. One exec cleared his throat. We, didn't expect. She cut her gaze toward him. One look, no words, he went quiet. Garrett spoke next, voice measured. The CEO has confirmed reinstatement per Clause 9. This meeting is under formal compliance protection. Notes are restricted. External discussion is prohibited under penalty of breach. Someone whispered to their assistant under the table, cancel my lunch, and maybe the next 4 years. The large screen on the wall flickered to life. The CEO, gaunt but lucid, appeared via secure feed. His voice, when it came, was sharp, controlled. We will begin shortly. Madison sat, folded her hands, said nothing. Because in a room that once silenced her silence now was the power. And every executive there felt it in their teeth. The legal pad trembled slightly in Garrett Rowe's hand as he rose from his chair. The room had already been reduced to a dull hum of controlled panic, managing directors avoiding eye contact, junior VPs pretending to check Slack, and the acting CEO slowly loosening his tie like it was strangling him. But when Garrett laid the contract down on the polished conference table, the room slipped into something quieter than silence. It was the sound of reputations evaporating. Cleared his throat once, then again. The document I'm holding is the original employment agreement for Madison Clark, signed on March 2nd, 8 years ago, countersigned by then COO Jonathan Keene, and updated with compliance authority language 2 years later under board ratification. No one spoke. He slid a single-page printout from a red folder. For clarity, I will read the operative clause now. He didn't preface it with a speech, an offer interpretation. Just read. All actions taken during unauthorized termination of the designated compliance authority are nullified pending written CEO review. This includes, but is not limited to, contract approvals, promotions, compensation adjustments, resource reallocations, and legal waivers connected to internal oversight. You could almost hear the synapses firing around the table. One by one, executives started scanning their own memory banks like terrified accountants, flipping through burning ledgers. One murmured, "My bonus cleared last night." Garrett nodded grimly. "Pending CEO review, it is now considered invalid." CFO Morton leaned forward, voice low. "Are we saying retroactively?" "Yes," Garrett said, "retroactively. As of the timestamp on the badge deactivation." Another exec hissed under their breath. "That's half the Q4 package." HR's head of operations spoke next, her voice tight. "And the stock options?" Garrett turned to the next line. "Nullified until further determination. This clause triggers a suspension on all scheduled equity disbursements tied to internal restructuring events." A stunned silence fell again. Not the awkward kind, not the tension before a fight kind. The quiet of falling altitude. Madison didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her eyes scanned the table, calm, unflinching. Then Garrett dropped the final blow, without even raising his voice. Additionally, as confirmed by counsel this morning, Madison's compliance signature remains active with the SEC as the company's internal regulatory certifier. Philip Brandt nearly choked. "What the hell does that mean?" "It means," Garrett said, "that any filings made in the past 36 hours, annual compliance affirmations, vendor certifications, executive disclosures, may be invalidated. If challenged, they could be interpreted as misrepresentation." SEC-level misrepresentation? Someone asked, barely above a whisper. Garrett didn't answer. He just closed the folder. Suddenly, a junior exec leapt to their phone like it was a life raft. Someone else stood up, only to sit right back down when Madison's eyes met theirs. Morton leaned forward, elbows on the table, face gray. "You're telling us we're exposed." Madison finally spoke. Just 3 words. "Didn't fire me." That landed like a judge's gavel. Because the truth had calcified in that one sentence. They had done this. Not just fired someone. They had erased their own safety net. Garrett continued, now almost clinically. "We'll begin immediate review of all board-related disbursements and personnel actions taken during the nullification period. Outside counsel has been retained." Philip, still hoping for some thread of normalcy, tried a desperate half-smile. "Oh, this is just a pause, right? A formality." Garrett didn't blink. "No, this is a reset, Across the room, phones buzzed with alert after alert. Messages from legal, finance, risk. Subject lines like, hold disbursement immediately, SEC review flag triggered, vendor retracting letter of intent, and all of it, the collapse, the unraveling, the perfect storm, had started the moment they handed Madison that envelope. Nobody laughed now. Nobody clapped, because while they celebrated progress, they'd forgotten to read the one document that could strip their power bare. And Madison? She was still holding the original. The screen on the far wall flickered once, then stabilized into a dimly lit room with a single lamp casting long shadows against beige wallpaper. There he was, Jonathan Keene, CEO, thinner than they remembered, hollowed out from the chemo, pale from the months of radiation. But his eyes were the same. Sharp, calculating, awake. Someone cleared their throat reflexively. Another exec adjusted their collar like they'd been caught stealing from the offering plate. Morning, Keene said, voice calm but dry enough to crack concrete. Looks like I missed quite the party. No one laughed. The tension in the room was thick enough to butter toast with. Keene leaned slightly toward the camera. I'll make this brief. I asked one person to keep us clean. One person who knew the actual cost of shortcuts, read the details, who never smiled when something stank. His gaze tracked from one board member to the next like a predator surveying a herd. And you fired her. Because what? She wasn't inspirational enough, didn't play the game, because she didn't smile while quietly keeping your asses out of prison. He let the question hang. No one answered. In the corner, Brandt opened his mouth. Keene lifted a finger. Just one. Don't, he said, eyes narrowing. You'll only dig deeper. Brandt froze. Keene turned slightly toward the screen as if addressing someone just off camera. I watched the stream. Madison sat perfectly still. No smirk, no approval, just the subtle tilt of her head like she was cataloging every moment for future dissection. I saw the clapping, Keene continued. The fake smiles. The promotions built on someone else's diligence. I saw you hand her a deactivated badge like a party favor. He tapped a folder just out of frame. Then I read your approvals. Every clause, every vendor waiver, every bonus authorization. The temperature in the room dropped. Let me be absolutely clear. He leaned in. Every deal, every clause you approved after that moment, assume it's on review, retroactively, personally, immediately. Murmurs broke across the table. Keene didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. One exec, an SVP in charge of business development, tried to speak. His lips moved. Nothing came out, muted, by order of the CEO. Keene turned back to the camera, and this time the fire beneath the calm was unmistakable. Some of you think I'm half dead and checked out. Good. Keep thinking that. While you panic, I'll be going line by line through the last 48 hours of corporate malpractice. He tilted his head. You just triggered a compliance clause that's been sitting untouched for 2 years. Madison didn't walk out of here angry. She walked out activated. Gasps. A few people glanced at their tablets. The clause was real. The authority was live. And the compliance authority, the role they thought was just an expensive paper pusher, now held the power to unwind every single move they made. Expect a freeze, Keene said flatly, on all discretionary spending, on performance bonuses, on internal promotions tied to asset evaluations, and especially on any deal that involved unsigned risk waivers. A beat of silence. Then, almost softly, you let greed override caution. Again, he leaned back, the camera angle widened. The man was sick, yes, but the room suddenly felt like it was spinning around his gravity. I'll let Madison continue, but understand this, he locked eyes with no one and everyone. From this moment forward, your authority exists at her discretion. He pressed something on his desk. The screen went black. No goodbye, no pleasantries, just absence. The power vacuum was immediate. Executives sat rigid, their eyes darting like caged animals in a room where all the air had been sucked out. The mutinous laughter from the all-hands was now just an echo choking in their throats. And across the boardroom table, Madison finally lifted the folder she'd brought in. Still no smile, just a page turning, and the sound of panic quietly blooming behind every blinking eyelid. It started with a single click. One green button in the internal compliance dashboard. Madison pressed it without ceremony, without announcement. The room didn't need one. The moment her fingertip touched the touchpad, the true storm began, not the yelling kind, not the chest-thumping executive tantrum, but the cold, system-wide rollback of authority they never should have had. The freeze hit like a frost in July. At 9:04 a.m., the first automatic flag locked outgoing payments to 6 executive accounts, bonuses that had been pre-scheduled under a reclassification structure, Brandt himself had called performance redistribution. Translation: his friends got richer for surviving the transition. Now, labeled pending compliance review. At 9:07 a.m., the internal HRIS pinged all managers who had issued promotions within the last 72 hours. Those actions were now reversed. All affected employees received identical notices, temporary hold placed on advancement. Contact your manager. Except their managers were busy. Most were huddled inside offices, frantically trying to get clarification from legal, only to be told, "We'll get back to you," in the kind of corporate voice reserved for funerals and lawsuits. At 9:11 a.m., a vendor email chain went viral inside the office like an infection. Company's upcoming partnership with Kylon Tech, a data infrastructure darling prepping for IPO, had just imploded. Why? Because someone on the Kylon Tech side had read the morning headlines. More importantly, someone had gotten wind of Madison's name being reinstated in SEC oversight systems. Their head of risk sent a blunt message, now screenshotted across 4 departments. Wait, they fired their compliance authority and forgot to inform the SEC. Pull out now. The deal, once worth $38 million in pre-market equity leverage, was gone before the breakfast burritos hit the warming trays. At 9:24 a.m., an emergency call came in from a long-standing partner in Boston. The COO of that firm, still half asleep and sipping hotel coffee, barked into the phone. "You fired your internal compliance certifier during a restructuring." Silence on the line from the Environ Tech side was apparently enough. The partner scoffed, audible even through Bluetooth static. "And I'm supposed to trust your sign-offs are clean?" "Nah, pulling out until further notice." Click, collapse. By 10 o'clock a.m., Madison had restored 73 internal controls, not out of pettiness, not for applause, but because it was her job. She didn't gloat. She didn't explain. She just sat with that same manila folder beside her, occasionally clicking, occasionally typing, occasionally nodding as Garrett fed her updates from legal. All around her, the air thickened. People started to look at her differently, not like the background analyst, not like the overly serious compliance lady who didn't laugh at Slack memes. They looked at her like a sentient firewall, a gatekeeper they had laughed at, ignored, bypassed, until she reappeared as the one person who could legally unmake their titles, strip their stock, stop their deals in flight. And Madison didn't need to raise her voice. Her silence did the cutting. HR VP Chloe tried once to regain the room. "If we could all just take a breath and maybe clarify where we stand." Madison didn't even turn. She just opened a compliance console on the screen behind her. The new access logs all said the same thing: owner, Clark M. Authority, executive level oversight scope. Total. Chloe sat back down. By noon, half the board had vacated to legal subcommittees. By 12:07 p.m., the catering team packed up uneaten fruit platters and untouched salmon. And by 12:18 p.m., 3 executives had unofficially updated their LinkedIn statuses to open to work. All while Madison sat, centered, quiet, not smug, not vindictive, just present. And as the last round of freezes took hold, the company finally began to understand. Hadn't just lost a compliance officer. They'd lost the one person who had quietly kept the machine from swallowing itself whole. The air was brittle. You could feel it, how every inhale in that boardroom felt like breathing through glass. Phones had stopped buzzing, not because the chaos had passed, but because no one wanted to be seen checking their devices anymore. Madison's screen was the only one anyone watched now, each click echoing louder than any raised voice ever had in that space. At 1:06 p.m., the conference screen blinked back to life. Keene was back, same dim lighting, same unblinking stare. He didn't waste time. "This is the final directive," he said, voice sharp and low. "Effective immediately, all compliance matters now report to her. Directly. No intermediaries, no board votes, no soft approvals." He didn't say her name. He didn't have to. Everyone looked at Madison. She didn't look back. Keene's eyes swept the room like a scalpel across soft tissue. "There will be no appeals. This is not a trial period. This is restoration and elevation." He leaned in, and for the first time, the fire behind his sunken eyes flickered hard enough to scorch. "You broke the protection that kept this company in the good graces of the SEC. You did it to save face in front of a crowd who doesn't even remember your name the next day." She remembers all of them. Click. The feed ended. No goodbye, no applause. Just one final word branded across the boardroom like a verdict. Madison stood. Her chair slid back with a controlled scrape. Garrett handed her a new ID badge, its black stripe now embossed with a small, almost invisible symbol in the corner, an eagle clasping a shield. Executive security clearance. Only 3 people in the company had it. Now she was one of them. She clipped the badge to her blazer. Calm, precise. Not for show, just function. Garrett spoke next, clearing his throat like someone announcing a storm warning. The following individuals are now under formal investigation for obstruction of oversight, bypassing of internal compliance controls, potential falsification of legal documentation in the wake of unauthorized termination procedures. He listed the names. Chloe from HR, Brandt, the VP of Operations, the CFO. Each name dropped like an anvil into the silent room. Chloe shifted in her seat, trying not to sweat. Brandt stared at the table like it might offer a trapdoor. Legal continued, stone-faced. You are required to submit all communication records, approval histories, discretionary financial decisions made in the past 72 hours. Your access to company systems is suspended pending outcome. The internal chat lit up in the background like wildfire, but no one moved. Madison didn't gloat. She didn't deliver some monologue about justice or getting the last word. She just stepped forward and picked up a silver laptop from the cart behind the screen. It bore the company's seal and a nameplate. Clark, M. Oversight Authority. She logged in. No password prompt, biometric scan, one green light, and just like that she was in. Not just reinstated, installed. This wasn't a return, it was a realignment. Someone from finance, brave or stupid or both, whispered what happens to the partner contracts. Madison finally spoke, voice quiet but razor sharp. We rebuild, the right way, or we don't rebuild at all. There was no applause, no high fives. Just a slow, dawning awareness that the entire axis of power had shifted 6 feet to the left, and into the hands of the one person they never thought would hold it. She didn't stay for small talk. She didn't accept the congratulations. She gathered her notes, closed her screen, and walked out, badge gleaming. Nobody followed, because every single person in that room now knew she wasn't there to be liked. She was there to be unignorable. The meeting was supposed to be over. People were gathering their things, carefully, quietly, as if the wrong sound might trigger another clause, another freeze, another humiliation. Chairs creaked. Laptops clicked shut. One exec stared blankly at a half-written resignation email, cursor blinking like a countdown. Then Garrett stood. Again, one hand raised. Before we adjourn, he said, tone heavier now, almost funereal. There's one final clause the CEO instructed me to read into the record. Everyone froze, some with dread, some with denial, one or two with the kind of existential nausea usually reserved for malpractice lawsuits or public earnings calls. Garrett unfolded a page. Old paper, signed, time-stamped, watermarked. The kind of document you don't remember signing until it ruins your life. He reads slowly. Clearly, without pause, should termination of the compliance authority occur improperly, the board of directors, in executing said termination without required authorization, thereby waives all collective indemnity for financial misreporting, regulatory misstatement, and fiduciary breach occurring within that fiscal year. Silence. Then Garrett added, this clause was ratified in 2021. Majority vote. No abstentions, there it was. The final knife. Because it wasn't just the company that was exposed now, it was them. Individually, personally, their names, their decisions, their signatures. Gone was the corporate armor of plausible deniability. Gone were the golden handcuffs and multi-million-dollar safety nets. One board member went ghost white, like he'd seen the IRS agent of his nightmares crawl out of the wall. Another closed his laptop slowly, placed both hands on the lid like it was a coffin, and whispered, we're fed. No one disagreed. HR's head, who had smiled so confidently 2 days earlier while handing Madison the envelope, now looked like she was waiting to be cuffed. The CFO muttered something about consulting counsel and stared into the middle distance. A legal associate in the corner began typing furiously, timestamps, audio logs, whatever might someday prove they'd been just following orders. And through it all, Madison stood. No fanfare, no swelling music, just that same steel composure. She picked up the folder she'd walked in with, tucked it under her arm, and said simply, next time, the fine print. Then she turned and walked out. No mic drop, no vindictive grin, no backward glance. The boardroom didn't move, didn't breathe. Not until the echo of her heels vanished down the hall and the door side shut behind her. And even then, no one dared to speak first, because they all understood what had just happened. They hadn't fired a compliance officer. They'd fired the person holding the floodgates shut, then drowned in the aftermath. And Madison, she didn't just survive. She rewrote the ending, on her terms, with their signatures. You're the real stars of the corporate jungle. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe, or I'll flick the switch on your old cubicle memories.